Just imagine you're in the desert and you've walked all day and you're dying of thirst and you see a pool of water up ahead and it's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. You need the water. You're dying for the water. You're tired and hot and thirsty and you can't wait to take a cool drink in the pool of paradise. You're exhausted. You run up to the pool only to find that there actually is no pool. There's no water, in fact. You're just surrounded by more and more sand. I know, you've heard the story countless times. You've seen it in movies and books for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is a mirage. A mirage is something that is not real, but looks very enticing. This culture is creating a mirage, and they're going back and forth through all the areas of life to make sure that the mirage is the most incredible and enticing and attractive display you've ever seen. Only, it's not actually real. They've tried to bend the light in such a way as to create a mirage of paradise that everybody wants to get to, but again, it's not real. They'll tell you in all different kinds of ways that this will be paradise. It'll bring peace and happiness on earth to all the people far and wide, but it's still not real. Today we look at several stories where this culture, academics, government, etc. pretend that there's something there, where there is nothing. They need you to believe in the mirage for this whole thing to work. So for Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. Let's get started. Thanks for choosing Church Public. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you joining in here today. If you're listening on audio, I really appreciate you, and you really make this work. If, for instance, though, you want to see some of the videos that we're going to reference today, and we'll look at a few, as well as some tweets and some other screen grabs, you may want to head over to churchpublic.com and watch the video. It's up to you. I like it both ways. You may listen to the video and then watch the audio. I just said that backwards, but that's okay. You get the picture. Or maybe you don't. Anyway, thanks for being here and being part of this show. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, hit the like button, hit the share, hit the subscribe. That may help me get my words in better order. Or it may not. We'll see what happens. But anyway, thanks for being part of this community. You make it work. And I'm here for you. I'm here to help you understand and make sense of this crazy world so that you can understand what it means to follow Jesus and live in this crazy place that we call the world right now, where culture is just against you, and more it's against God, and we're seeing that. So how do you follow after God and live in the world? That's what I want to continue to help you with. So if this is helpful to you, like it, subscribe. If you think it's helpful to somebody else, hit that little share, that notification button, that launcher to send it to somebody through the ether webs, and I would appreciate that, and maybe they would appreciate it too. All right, let's get to some stories. So we've got a lot going on today, and the first thing we're going to actually look at is a very strange story. I don't know about you, but I grew up wanting to be Indiana Jones. Maybe you did too. Maybe you didn't. I don't know. But this is a story that I came across that now archaeologists are asked to not gender skeletons because of something. A Quebec-based archaeology student tweeted that archaeologists should just not label human remains as either male or female, but take into account the potential gender transitions of an individual. This is all according to the website The College Fix, where they're looking at different colleges and what is going on there, which is a whole thing. This person who authored this tweet reportedly lamented online that the bones of a gendered transitioned person are found. They, quote, can't escape their assigned sex. Just to unpack this and unpack what's going on, that means that to your very DNA, to your bones, as biology will tell you, though I'm not a biologist, you are either male or female. That is just the reality of life. You may do all kinds of changes to your outer body, but it doesn't change your DNA. In fact, it can't. You can't change the DNA of being either male or female. But these students, and apparently some archaeologists, want to not label bones of dead people, sometimes long dead people, as either male or female. This student said, quote, you might know the argument that the archaeologists who find your bones one day will assign you the same gender as you had at birth. Quote, end quote. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. So yes, that's true, because it is true, because science. Continuing on with this student's quote, regardless of whether you transition, you cannot escape your assigned sex. End quote. To which I would also say, yes, that's actually true. Okay, we'll continue on. Professor Jennifer Raff published this book, Origin: A Genetic History of the Americas, where in this book she said, quote, Christian colonizers impose a gender binary on Native American archaeological sites, end quote. So that's really the point here, isn't it? Their idea is that Christians and colonizers and white people and bad men throughout the centuries, especially in America, have imposed this biological reality of male and female upon the world. Never mind the history of humanity that we knew were male and female. Never mind the history of humanity that requires male and female humans to procreate, biology again. Never mind the entire mammalian species and other species as well that require male and female to procreate, again, science. Yes, it is definitely the white Christian male colonizers that oppressed the Native Americans and others into thinking there were only two genders, and we're actually now realizing that the 57 genders and counting that we now have were here all along, and we didn't understand that. So, dear Indiana Jones, please stop identifying the skeletons you discover in your quest as male or female. That's just rude. I may have made that last part up, but apparently that is what they're asking us to do. Just forget biology entirely and go against the whole system. Or perhaps, as we started from the beginning in talking about a mirage, this whole thing is made up and there's just male and female. But I don't know, because again, I'm not a biologist. All right, now to another story. Let's turn to our wonderful politicians. Let's ask our politicians what is going on and what are they protesting? What is the really big thing that we need to talk about? And we have an answer. We have an answer from our very own AOC, Alexandria Occasional, oh my gosh, I can't do her name, Cortez. Anyway, I'm not doing great today. So this is a tweet from ABC News, and this is where we'll start here today. And again, if you're just on audio, I'm going to describe this the best I can for you, but as some say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is ABC News that says, this is from July 19th. Justin, Representatives Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, other House Democrats were arrested in abortion rights protest at the Supreme Court. So to set the stage, we all know, and if you missed, you can go back to churchpublic.com or any of the podcast places and listen to more than one episode that I did on the Mississippi versus Dobbs decision that then led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So those now, and just to be very clear, means that there was no constitutional right to an abortion. So that decision goes back to the states where lawmakers make laws depending on whatever the state and the constituents want. So this article is AOC and Ilhan Omar, other Democrats, were arrested in an abortion rights protest at the Supreme Court. So they were outside the court protesting for abortion rights, I guess you would say. I will say, to give credit to ABC for just a little ways, they did actually say abortion and not women's health care or some other euphemism. So maybe good on them. Anyway, now, if you are not watching and you're just listening, what you see in this picture is on one side of the picture, you have AOC, hands behind her back, handcuffed, waiting to be arrested. You have Ilhan Omar on the other side of the screen, hands behind her back, waiting to be arrested or being arrested or in some part of that process. The only problem is, and this is where we're back to the mirage, they're not actually handcuffed. They're pretending to be handcuffs. They're pretending to be handcuffed. So here's a video of AOC. We're just going to roll through this. There may be a little bit of audio, but the audio doesn't really say anything. So I want you to watch this video. I'm going to loop it a couple of times as I'm talking through because it's just interesting. So we have AOC. She is being led by a police officer. Her hands are behind her back. The police officer is holding onto her arm in the normal police officer grab location. Now, if this is the second time through, if you missed it, so her hands are behind her back. She's clearly handcuffed, except that she's not actually handcuffed. So at this moment right here, she raises the power fist to her constituents, and then, of course, puts her hands right back behind her back where they're handcuffed in the invisible handcuffs. Yep. Okay. So according to CNN, more than a dozen Democratic members of Congress were among those arrested by Capitol Police on Tuesday afternoon as part of an abortion rights protest in front of the Supreme Court. Capitol Police later said they had actually arrested 34 people and 16 members of Congress. California Representative Jackie Speer, who was also arrested, wrote on Twitter, quote, proud to march with my Democratic colleagues and get arrested for women's rights, abortion rights, the rights for people to control their own bodies, and the future of our democracy, end quote. And as we've noted, many of these representatives were not actually handcuffed. But and that's funny. It's just funny, and it shows this mirage that they're being arrested. Except I think they really were arrested, but they weren't actually handcuffed, but they had to pretend to be handcuffed because oppression and blah, 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 whatever. But here's the actual question. Here's what I actually want to ask. What were they protesting? Washington, D.C. is going to have one of the most liberal abortion policies in America, probably up until the moment of birth, probably for all of time in American history, because those are the people who are running Washington. It's going to have that policy. New York is going to have that policy. California is going to have that policy. Oregon is going to have that policy. Any state that wants to have an abortion policy to the point of birth can actually have it. Now, I think that's a total atrocity and affront to God and creation by sacrificing children on the altar of death, but this is the federal system where any state that wants to legislate this can now have it. So again, what are they protesting? And by they, I mean the members of Congress. We'll get more to that in a minute. What did the Supreme Court say? Just in case we forgot, just in case we don't remember, they said that this is not a constitutional right because it's just not in the Constitution. Again, you can go and read the statement. It's rather long, but it gives a lot of context into what the Constitution is, what the Constitution says, what it says about this, precedent, etc., etc. It's really fascinating if you're interested in such a thing. So the Supreme Court justices said, therefore, since it's not in the Constitution, it is to be handled, this idea of abortion, by making legislation. So, do you know who makes legislation? Do you think these members of Congress know who makes legislation? Well, the big hint is Congress makes legislation. Oh my gosh, I can't. Okay. Just to connect all of the dots for us, because apparently we don't know how to do this anymore. There is a group of the government, we'll start here, that is in charge of justice. That's the judicial branch, like the courts. There is the executive branch, the president, the leaders, and then there is the legislative branch, and the legislative branch makes legislation, and those that are contained in the legislative branch, for instance, are House of Representatives and Senate. And the members of Congress who were protesting against the Supreme Court were the lawmakers. So they were protesting outside the Capitol to let Congress know that they should make legislation. The members of Congress were protesting the Congress to let them know they should make legislation. And even, let's see, I think I have this picture here. Even the LA Times, so this is the LA Times, and I grabbed this screen grab because it just says everything. You have AOC in the background. Again, if you're not watching, AOC is in the background raising her fist right before it goes back into the invisible handcuffs. But at the bottom, this is from the LA Times, their own caption says, "The lawmakers were expected to be fined and released." Everybody who knows anything knows that this is an issue, that lawmakers make laws. But the lawmakers were protesting the judicial department for not making laws because the judicial justices, the Supreme Court, they don't make laws. They rule on laws. That's actually their function. Those that make laws are in Congress, in the Senate. So I just have this thought, and I know no one's gonna agree with this, but I have a suggestion. Perhaps a better use of time might have been for the lawmakers who were protesting and getting arrested and put in invisible handcuffs to make laws with their time, because that's kind of their job and what they do. But whatever. Because here's the rub. These lawmakers know they cannot make this law. In fact, they even tried to make a sort of law a few weeks ago, and it didn't even go through because it's not popular, and no one wants this. And everyone knows that. A nationwide law codifying the killing of a baby to the point of birth stands no chance of passing both houses at this point, and they know it. So instead, they pose for a photo op with invisible handcuffs to show you they care and are working very hard at their job of making laws by not making laws. But just to go even deeper into the mirage, because that's where we are now, perhaps the invisible handcuffs are not actually literal, but they are figurative, showing the world that even though they are the lawmakers and actually live in the freest country in the history of the world, they are still handcuffed by the patriarchy of toxic masculinity and evil capitalist colonialism, which is why we can't say whether a skeleton is male or female. Or maybe the lawmakers should just, do their job and make laws. What do I know? All right, let's get to another story here that gets back to definitions, because we get to a lot of definitions on the show because apparently we don't know how to do that anymore. So this is Webster's Dictionary. Webster's Dictionary has recently changed their definition on words again, which is just great. So this is the definition of female. Again, if you're not watching, I'm just putting up a slide that shows the definition of female. And some of these are fine. It seems to me, there's A, B, C, D, E, F, and apparently there's even more. Even some of these have subcategories. It seems like the definition should be a lot shorter than this to me. Something like, let's see, maybe number C, made up of usually adult members of the female sex, or possibly A1, which is being the sex that has the capacity to bear young. It seems like you could combine those into one and have an easy definition, but instead we have all of these definitions. But here's the one that I want to point to, and this is having a gender identity that is the opposite of male, number or letter B. So the definition of female, according to Webster's, is now having a gender identity the opposite of male. What does that mean? Well, actually, it means nothing. It should be adult human female or something, a person who is able to give birth, a woman who is able to give birth. But no, now it is just the opposite of male. So what is the opposite of male then? What's the definition of that? It doesn't say. I'm not sure. I couldn't answer that. And then, of course, just to complete the circle, we have male, where now male is also, number B, having a gender identity that is the opposite of female. So female is the opposite of male, male is the opposite of female, and that may not sound very strange to you, but the reality is that just means that there's no definition of male or female, because it's just whatever you want it to be, or identify it to be, and that's where we're going. And this will probably get amended shortly as well, just to be a female is someone that identifies as a female. I can almost guarantee that's coming. It's going to come, and it's going to happen very soon. It just will, because that's the direction that we're going, where a definition, by definition, is a definition, which means it's nothing. And that's where we're going. You can't define something within something. You have to define something without something. So that's how you figure out what these things are. But of course, we can't do that anymore, and you have to just go with the circular definition of a woman is someone who's a woman, which is nothing. And of course, Matt Walsh's amazing documentary about what is a woman sheds some light on this, or not, depending on which way you're looking at it. But this is where the definition of female, the definition of male have been changed, eliminating any confusion of what a male or female is, or actually not. The definitions now of both words and both realities have been, I would say, irreparably destroyed, so that neither has actually any meaning anymore. And that's kind of a problem. Like, we actually should know how to define things. And that's part of the mirage. You just create whatever you want and then say, this is what it is. And then when people get there and go, I don't understand, what is this? I don't know. Nothing. Everything. Whatever you want it to be. So, speaking of what is a woman, poor recording artist Macy Gray, whom I hadn't heard of in, 20 years. She had a couple of weirdly voiced one-hit wonders or two-hit wonders or something. I want to say in the 90s. I didn't even look it up. I don't care that much. But she's in hot water. She's in hot water over her comments about a woman. So she spoke to Piers Morgan about men in women's sports. And then she committed the ultimate blasphemy. She said, quote, I will say this, and everybody's going to hate me, but as a woman, just because you go change your parts doesn't make you a woman. Sorry, she added, if you want me to call you her, I will, because that's what you want, but that doesn't make you a woman just because I call you a her and just because you got a surgery, end quote. And of course, this got her in immense trouble, because you are not allowed to say that a man is not a woman. A man is a woman if a man wants to be a woman, of course, because a female is someone who's the opposite of a male. Or a male is someone who is the opposite of a female, or whatever you want that to be, because it just is. So Macy goes on to another show, I think it's NBC with Hoda, and she has an apology tour, and we're going to watch this cringy video and see what she says.
I think life is an education process. The more you sit with people, the more you talk to people, it changes your perspective. So has your perspective changed, do you feel?
I've learned so much, and I think being a woman is a vibe, and it's something I'm very proud of, and it's very precious to me, and I think that if you in your heart feel that that's what you are, then that's what you are, regardless of what anybody says or thinks. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
No, I don't know what you're saying. I think you were right the first time, and I think you should have stuck to your guns. But of course, in this culture, you cannot do that. And somewhere, whether it was manager, whether it was somebody said, hey, if you don't apologize for this, you're not going to work anymore. You're not going to do music anymore. No one's going to buy your stuff anymore. You can't be a celebrity anymore. And those that say, well, it doesn't matter. You can just call people whatever you want. No, it does matter. When they start taking away your livelihood, when they start saying you can't work if you don't say the right words, that does make a difference. And this whole mirage, does make a difference. It makes a difference to livelihood. It makes a difference to reality. It makes a difference. So a couple of things. If you weren't watching, I really appreciate facial expressions. I probably make too many myself. But the I think her name is Hoda, who interviews Macy, says, and you just watch the face. It's like the mom face when you're in trouble and you've done something wrong, and the mom is saying, like, so are you gonna apologize? Like, do you know what you did wrong? Are you gonna say the right words to get out of trouble? Like, that's 100% what's happening here. She's like, did you learn anything about what you did wrong? Are you ready to apologize and change your ways? This is such a cult. It's such a crazy religion where, like, it's almost like it really is a functional confessional, where you're confessing to the priest, where, okay, tell me your sins, and then maybe you'll be forgiven. I'll go talk to the people in the back and see, like, hey, can we forgive you? I'm not sure. We're gonna have to like spend some time on the panel figuring out if you're okay. But she definitely is like, did you learn anything? And this clip goes on for a while. It's actually fascinating to watch, like, this rambling apology that Macy gives, trying to get to whatever the thing is that they're looking for to say that, okay, you're okay, you get to go back to work or whatever. It's cringy and it's terrible. And I didn't want to play the whole thing for you. You can go watch it if you want at some point. But it's so sad. It's so sad for her. But I also want to point to woman is a vibe. Like, what in the world does that mean? Being a woman is a vibe? I would say no. We're back to this definition that we looked at earlier. No, a woman is not a vibe. A woman is not whatever you want it to be. A woman is not, if you identify as a woman, or a woman is what a woman is. I mean, no. All of that, no. A woman is an adult human female, one who is able to reproduce, at least generally. I know not all women are able to do that, but this is generally. We're not allowed to make generalizations anymore, but we should, because definitions are based on generalizations. A human has 10 fingers. A human who loses a finger in a woodworking accident is still a human and should have 10 fingers. A human who is born with 11 fingers still should have 10 fingers. That's why it's a generalization about this. We should be able to do this, but we can't. So speaking of definitions, there's one more that we have to hit today, and that is that the House of Representatives, while they're not protesting, are actually doing some strange work, and they pass a gay marriage bill, a same-sex marriage bill. So we're back to the question that we asked the other day. What is marriage? And here we are with this question again. And the answer is still the same, but the government, and now we know, even many conservative, quote-unquote, Republicans, just cannot answer the question, what is marriage? Yeah, we know that Democrats are progressive. Their policies and votes are not surprising. They're pushing this agenda, the LGBTQAAIP #+. This is not surprising, but Republicans, aren't Republicans supposed to conserve traditional values? Aren't they supposed to conserve something? Aren't they supposed to be built on some kind of foundation? Well, apparently not. I don't know. Here's some context. The U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday voted to pass a bill that would codify same-sex marriage. And lawmakers passed in the House the, quote, Respect for Marriage Act. There's a euphemism if you ever had one. And the numbers were 267 for, 157 against. But here's the real big thing. 47 Republicans joined the Democrats, including GOP leader Elise Stefanik, National Republican Congressional Committee Chair Tom Emmer, and 45 others. CNN reports House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said, quote, "It's critical to ensure that federal law protects those whose constitutional rights might be threatened by Republican-controlled state legislators. LGBTQ Americans and those in interracial marriages deserve to have certainty they will continue to have their right to equal marriage recognized no matter where they live," end quote. Now, by the way, there is no law, legislation, anything that is threatening any kind of interracial marriage. I don't know where that's coming from. They're throwing this scare thing out there that it's apparently under attack, but I mean, as far as I can tell, it's not anywhere. There is no law anywhere. I mean, this goes back to the 60s. It was codified into law then, and there's nothing against that. But and the fact that these are lumped together is just so frustrating. There are many different races in the world. And the fact is, realistically, biologically, scientifically, all of the men in any of those races are similar. And all of the women in all of the races in all of the world are similar. A man and a woman are not the same in any race in history of the entire world. That's just reality. But for some reason, we've lumped these two things together, saying that they're similar, but they're not. They're so far from being similar. So it's just a weird thing. Anyway, to peel apart those layers, and just talk about the same-sex aspect, which is really the definitional piece that's important here, because I don't care what race you are. It doesn't matter to me. A man and a woman is a man and a woman. Otherwise, it doesn't matter to me what race you are. It really doesn't matter. And it shouldn't matter to anybody what race you are. But the left continues to make it about race. Anyway, so for the same-sex issue, here's some history. Just in the past, 25 years, this is how fast this has happened, as opposed to literally the rest of human history. Just a couple of decades ago, then President Bill Clinton, not a conservative, supported by law marriage between just one man and just one woman. Back in 1996, Congress passed the Defense of Marriage Act by huge margins, limiting marriage as recognized by the federal government to legal unions of man and woman, period. The bill was signed into law in 1996 by then President Bill Clinton, and it was the law of the land until 2015, when the U.S. Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage nationwide in 2015. And this really is a barometer on the culture. Yes, some of us knew this already, but you have to understand this is what's happening. This is a clear example of politics being downstream of culture. The culture wants same-sex marriage, and they will get it, no matter what. And the culture loves this. The Hill reporter Emily Brooks congratulated Republicans for showing, quote, political evolution with the same-sex marriage vote, end quote. Charles Moran, president of the Log Cabin Republicans, a pro-LGBT plus group, celebrated the vote as a way to redefine conservatism and Republican goals around shared concerns. Whose shared concerns? I thought conservatism was supposed to be about conserving, not progressing, but apparently we're all progressing now, and no one is conserving. So apparently, a good number, 47 by this vote, of conservative Republicans support this measure. And according to some inside sources, that the number may actually be even higher, even up to 50%, but they're afraid to vote yes on this for fear of their constituency. And sure, you're sitting there thinking, isn't this the loving thing to do? Just let people marry each other, redefine marriage. This doesn't hurt anybody, right? No, it actually is a problem, and it actually does hurt people. And this is not the loving thing to do. If marriage can be anything you want it to be, which is what this is saying, and what the culture is saying, and what the Democrats are saying, and what apparently some quote-unquote conservative Republicans are saying, that marriage can just be whatever you want it to be, same-sex or whatever, then what can marriage not be? This is a really serious question, and we have to understand that definitionally, just like we looked at male and female, if a female is a certain thing, it cannot be the opposite thing. If a male is a certain thing, it cannot be the opposite thing. But if a female can be anything, then what can it not be? That's kind of a problem, because you've defined yourself out of a corner into, well, anything. Marriage for all time, not just even biblically, just historically and anthropologically, as we talked about the skeletons. Marriage for all time has been one man and one woman. Sure, that was taken advantage of. Sometimes there was polygamy, sometimes there was problems, but that was misused. It was abused. But by definition, marriage is one man and one woman, because that's how you procreate and that's how you continue on the human species. So now, if marriage is one man and one man, what does that mean? Or what about three men, like we talked about and I reported about several months ago in the throuple, which is three men, three dads in California who adopted a baby? Or what about interspecies? I mean, can a woman marry a horse? Sure, that's ridiculous, but why not? What is the limit of marriage if you're just defining it as whatever you want to define it as? And then I have a more serious question for you. What about age? Does age matter? Can a 40-year-old man marry an 8-year-old girl? Or can a 40-year-old man marry an 8-year-old boy? I know some of you are instinctively cringing at that thought, but the question is, why not? If you're changing the definition of marriage to whatever you want it to be, why couldn't it be that? This is the logical end of redefining marriage. There is no limit because there is no definition, because words matter and definitions matter. And without definitions, there are no limits. We have to define things and we have to protect the definitions of things so that this whole society can function. Without the definitions of things, there is anarchy, or worse, rule by those that tell you what the definitions are, which is pretty close to where we are at this point, as we saw by poor Macy Gray, who got just obliterated by saying a definition that has been functionally, historically, biblically, sociologically true for all of time. Now she can't work unless she agrees the definitions have no definition. This is the crazy world that we're living in. So we turn to Jesus. Jesus talking about the definition of this. Matthew 19:4, Jesus answered, "Have you not read that he, God, who created them from the beginning, made them," this is humans, "male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father, his mother, and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." God created them from the beginning, male and female. This is the way life is, and we all have known this for all of time up until apparently 2015. We began talking about a mirage, and we'll end, in fact, with the truth. There's hope, there's eternal life, there's paradise, but you can't get there from here. You can't work your way there, you can't legislate your way there, you can't make it there on your own, and that is the gospel. That is why God sent his only son, Jesus, to help us cross this desert and actually make it into the promised land, not this mirage that culture promises for us. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and I pray that you follow Jesus today and choose the real over the mirage. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. Keep the faith.